Chapter 17. The Sufi. Black is Beautiful. Within the earliest group of the dogma, a document was circulated in Shabbetai Zevi's name. These are the 18 Commandments. The number 18 plays a prominent role among the Sufis, especially among the order of the Mevlevis, the dancing dervishes. Gershom Scholem, Messianic Ideas in Judaism, 1971, page 148. O paradox, black is the badge of hell, the hue of dungeons and the school of night. William Shakespeare, Love's Labour's Lost, Act 4, Scene 3, lines 251 and 252. As far as the fecundity principle is concerned, there are several accounts of how the previously discussed book, the Avohayim El Ha'ain, caused widespread sexual anarchy in Jewish communities. For example, the following document, cited by Dr. Moshe Perlmutter, describes the confessions of wife-swapping couples seeking absolution before the rabbinic courts of Satanov, Poland, and blames the book for seducing them to adultery. A copy from the witness affidavits of the chief rabbi of Satanov and his court. Before a session of 3 judges appeared Samuel, son of Shlomo, crying with tears, and stated, "I confess that I rejected the entire Torah. Herschel had sexual intercourse with my wife several times in my presence. I am guilty. She did not want to. Isaac Meyer had sexual intercourse 2 or 3 times with Leib ben Yeshayahu's wife. He brought me writings of the book Avohayim El Ha'ain and other books. He had relations in Zabrija with his sister-in-law Manucha. Leibush had sexual relations with my wife many times, also with my consent. Also, the busker Rabbi had sexual relations in the village. Even old man Elisha had sexual relations. The woman Roselle confessed to us with regret and contrition, with a lot of crying, that she had sexual relations several times with Leibush, Hirsch, and Leib, all with the consent of her husband, who told her, 'This is a mitzvah.'" Jonathan Eibeshutz and His Attitudes Towards Sabbationism, 1947, pages 53 and 54. A concept advanced by the book was that if one beheld the act of sexual intercourse, one would become very brilliant. It was also maintained that Moses had added a special element to this, that better than observing others engaged in the act of intercourse is to have interracial intercourse. There are various interpretations as to whether Moses actually married a black, ranging from interpretations that this referred to Moses' wife Zipporah in an allegorical sense, to that Moses had 2 wives, one white and the other black, as it states concerning the Ethiopian woman whom he had married in Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. According to Josephus, Moses' first wife was Tharbis, princess of Ethiopia, whom he married during the period before he left Egypt, while he was prince of Egypt and waged a war against Ethiopia. This idea is also advanced by a document of spurious origin that appeared in the 19th century under the name Sefer HaYashar, and received the approbations of prominent Orientalists. Eli Goldston, a prominent Boston area civic leader and chairman of the board of a gigantic utility, Eastern Gas Associates, died on January 21, 1974. Goldston had a prestigious position with the combined Jewish philanthropies. Shortly before his death, he had taken a leave of absence, a sabbatical, to attend the new School of Social Research in England that was affiliated with the leftist Socialist Fabian Society in England. Shortly after his death, it was announced that this great civic leader, businessman, and philanthropist, to whom Jewish causes were supposedly supreme, was leaving Eastern Gas Associates stock valued at approximately $250,000 to the Elma Lewis School in Roxbury, Massachusetts. The organization was engaged in subversive revolutionary activities. Rabbi Meyer Kahane called the group Black Nazis. The school, according to a U.S. government-coordinated investigation with JSL black undercover agents, was proven to be affiliated with Maoist activities. In a pretrial deposition of black leftist Elma Lewis, taken by the author during Goldston's life, she admitted that Goldston was financing her. Professor Hillel Levine, an expert in Sabbatian studies, maintained that Goldston engaged in sexual activities with her, from an interview with the author by Professor Hillel Levine, August 1987, for his book The Death of an American Jewish Community, Free Press 1991, which prominently featured the author and exposes Elma Lewis's terror tactics. At his funeral, a strange variety of Oriental and Black militants appeared who were known for their Third World Marxist-Leninist affiliations, and strangely enough, none other than Erwin D. Canham, publisher of the Christian Science Monitor. Erwin Canham is a member, as mentioned by Carol Quigley in Tragedy and Hope, of the mysterious Round Table Group, which is involved in subversive activities today on an international scale, as one manifestation of the ruling class or king-priest group of the communist conspiracy. Prominent in this group is the London affiliate of the Morgan banking interests in New York, known as Morgan, Grenfell and Company. It was shortly after the Yom Kippur War that Morgan, Grenfell and Company had arranged for a $3 billion financial transaction to resupply the Arab countries of Syria and Egypt with armaments. While on the face of it, it may seem that there is nothing harmful in Erwin Canham's showing up at Eli Goldston's funeral, it should be pointed out that Erwin Canham saw fit to get on the air of Boston station WBZ in 1972, right after the murder of Christian pilgrims in Israel, known as the Lod Massacre, and to praise the Japanese Red Army and so-called Palestinians for their heinous crime. After that incident, it would seem that Erwin Canham would be persona non grata to any member of Jewish philanthropies. But there is another sinister side to the enigmatic personality of the late Eli Goldston. Eli Goldston was a trustee of the World Peace Foundation, the WPF, in a nationally syndicated column appearing in various American newspapers, such as the Manchester Union Leader. On March 19, 1967, Edith Kermit Roosevelt exposed the WPF and what it was involved in. According to her, the WPF served as a clearinghouse for staff personnel for various agencies, especially our State Department. A reading of the Foundation's quarterly, entitled International Organization, showed that one of the primary objectives of the WPF was to mix United States and Soviet policies in international organizations and in the State Department's Bureau of International Affairs. Prominent in the World Peace Foundation at that time were Jerome Wiesner, president of MIT, and Calvin H. Plimpton, president of Amherst College. The WPF prepared a series of 7 booklets entitled Studies in Citizen Participation in International Relations. These studies describe the program for changing the attitudes of various ethnic groups in the United States. The WPF was unhappy with what they called the corny patriotism of the average African American Black person. In a WPF booklet entitled Americans in World Affairs, Catholics are berated because they are not liberal and are against the admission of Communist China into the United Nations. Their publications reflect a long-standing Illuminati Marxist hatred for traditionalism and patriotic allegiance, such as that of America's rural and working classes. But interestingly enough, religious Jews are singled out and described in derogatory terms. For example, Jews who go to a synagogue or temple regularly on the average are less like our world affairs criteria than those who go less often. Eli Goldston's support of Elma Lewis is then consistent when, according to Senate hearings, in 1968, Elma Lewis threatened to burn down the $1.25 million Mishkan Tefillah building, a Jewish parochial school, with the children in it. We can also understand why Elma Lewis's communist attorney, Lawrence Shubo, would be elected vice president of New England's American Jewish Congress, the AJC. Were these actions in keeping with the WPF's aims of destroying religious Jews and forcing them to assimilate? The answer is yes, not only from WPF's perspective, but also from the avowed purpose of the AJC, which, irrespective of its lip service to Jewish causes, has translated its efforts into activities designed to destroy the very essence of the Jewish yeshiva parochial school system in the United States. To understand the WPF better, one should realize that among its trustees was also the convicted communist spy, Algier Hiss, and that its founder, Edwin Ginn of the Ginn Publishers, issued the first American edition of the notoriously anti-Semitic The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, long before Henry Ford. Furthermore, its one-time president was Harvey Hollister Bundy, 1888 to 1963, who was prominently cited in Anthony Sutton's America's Secret Establishment, especially in Memorandum Number 9, the Bundy Operation. As a part of my protracted litigation with Elma Lewis, who was then supported by WPF leader Goldston, I was able to subpoena some of the WPF files that revealed their further subversive involvement. The following letter from Harvey Bundy to convicted communist Algier Hiss was found in their files. March 8, 1950. Algier Hiss, Esquire, 22 East 8th Street, New York City. Dear Algier, the trustees of the World Peace Foundation very carefully considered the question of your resignation at a meeting last Saturday and came to the conclusion that from the standpoint of the foundation it would be wise to accept this resignation. It was with great regret that we felt this action to be advisable, and it does not represent at all any loss of conviction on the part of myself and of your many friends on the board of your complete innocence. I look forward to the day when, like Dreyfus, your honors and medals will be returned to you, truth will prevail, and in that more happy future I can even hope for the time when we can ask you to again join the board. With every good wish in this most difficult world, sincerely yours, Harvey H. Bundy, President. The WPF, however, is merely a Bostonian manifestation of the hands of the CFR, which in turn embodies the commitments of its founder, Colonel House, to Gnostic Illuminism and socialism, out of which grew the United Nations. The black theme permeates these isms and institutions more than is readily apparent. Shortly after the publication of the first volume of To Eliminate the Opiate, a young man named Richard Gilman of Ann Arbor, Michigan, wrote me an extraordinary letter. Gilman disclosed to me that he had purchased a copy of my book at a local bookstore and drove to a parking lot and started to read the book. He stated he did not put it down until he had completed it. The book changed his life. Gilman, who was raised as a Reformed Jew, was outraged at the conspiracy perpetrated against him and was determined to find his way back to authentic Judaism. He started to observe the commandments and joined the Lubavitch Hasidic organization, Chabad. Richard developed a thirst for the sources of the information he found in my book and thoroughly scrutinized them. He then wrote me and asked me if there were any areas of research with which he could help me. I wrote Richard a letter explaining to him that time did not permit me to investigate the Muslim sect of the Sufi, which I suspected were somehow involved with the conspiracy, but was not quite sure how, or whether such research was worth pursuing. Richard became such an expert at this type of research that he became one of the principal forces behind the international periodical called Conspiracy Digest. Richard Gilman is considered to be one of the top authorities on conspiracies in the nation. Richard still corresponds with me, and we share research and primary sources together. Richard Gilman's research into the Sufis bore fruit, and today, as a result of his work and leads, we possess enough research material on the Sufis to write an encyclopedia about them. Sufism is a mystical Gnostic belief that predates Islam considerably, but became incorporated into it. Illuminati, communism, atheistic pantheism, sexual fantasy, antinomianism, Satanism, radical eschatology, apocalyptic cataclysm are all important elements of it, as are a lust for power and wealth. The Sufis interfaced with the power elite of the United Nations. The meditation room of the United Nations is Sufi Gnostic. In the Sufi mysticism, the color black plays an important role. The black altar of Mecca, the Kaaba, Holy of Holies, is draped in black. The banner of Muhammad was black. It means war. The illumination concept of Sufism is embodied in Sufi rituals, perpetrating the alternation of light and darkness, of black and white, such as laying alternate black and white cloths on the floor, or alternately kindling and extinguishing a lamp. The Sufis' phrase, Dar Tariqi Tarakat, in the darkness, the path, means light or understanding comes from darkness, so that darkness is synonymous with wisdom. Darkness equals night. The 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights, are of Sufi origin and have a hidden meaning. The Rosicrucians adopted almost literally the teachings of the Spanish Illuminist Sufis. The rose cross symbol of Rosicrucianism is derived from the founder of the Sufi order of Abdul Qadir el-Jilani, called the Rose of Baghdad. The Sufis celebrate pagan witch festivals, which have their roots in the fertility rites of antiquity, one of which is May Day, May 1st. The Sufis pretentiously consider themselves to be the originators of medieval Jewish Kabbalah and the source of the Zohar. The depraved book, Avalon has a gematria totaling 237, calculated as follows. This is equivalent to Sufi Edom. The theme of Edom being combined with Islam has grave mystical consequences in Jewish Kabbalistic systems, implying destruction. The verse, "So Esau went unto Ishmael and took Melechah, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, to be his wife," Genesis 28:9, is symbolic of Christianity and Islam conspiring to destroy the Jews. Indeed, the cooperation of the Mufti of Jerusalem with the Nazis in exterminating the Jews is considered by many Talmudic scholars, such as my late great rabbinic master Rabbi Yitzchak Hunter, 1907 to 1980, to be such a manifestation. Idris Shah, in his book, The Sufi, explicitly computes the gematria of Sufi as 186, and then arranges the numbers in hundreds, tens, and units, which yields the ultimate four-letter F word, the word for intercourse in the English language, introduced in medieval England. These letters from the Arabic root Puk, P-U-K, meaning like to come here, which also has a sexual connotation, symbolizing transcendentalism, signifying that Sufism is a transcendental philosophy. The Sufi introduced the four-letter F word into medieval English. Both Richard Gilman and I both regard the Crusades as Sufi plots. The Scottish Rites and Freemasonry conceals its true nature. Scottish is a Sufi code for Spain and conveys the ideas that the rite is of Spanish Sufi origin. Mistletoe, a symbol of sexual promiscuity, most popularly associated with the pagan custom at Christmas of kissing under the mistletoe, is a Sufi emblem. James Fraser authored the encyclopedic The Golden Bough, which attempted to undermine religious authority by relegating it to superstition through a detailed study of pagan practices. The title Golden Bough refers to mistletoe. The Sufi consider the burning bush in which God appeared to Moses to be not burning, but rather the effect of red leaves of an eastern mistletoe growing as a parasite on the acacia bush. Eli Goldston's address was 7 Acacia Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Was this a coincidence? Consider also the poem by the Sufi poet Rumi, and the emphasis is of the authors here. In winter the bare boughs that seem to sleep work covertly, preparing for their spring. These perceptions tell us, in effect, that the Sufi attitude towards Judaism is to destroy it like a parasite, burn it, through sexual corruption, that a good Sufi works covertly, conspiring for this revolution when the time is right. The unifying illuministic goal of breaking down all religions is probably best expressed by the following Sufi statement. I am the pagan. I worship at the altar of the Jew. I am the idol of the Yemenite, the actual temple of the fire worshipper, the priest of the Magian, the inner reality of the cross-legged Brahmin, meditating the brush and the color of the artist, the suppressed, powerful personality of the scoffer. One does not supersede the other. When a flame is thrown into another flame, they join at the point of flameness. You throw a torch at a candle, and then you say, "See, I have annihilated the candle's flame." Ishan Kaiser's Speech of the Sages. The corrupt United Nations, which conspires against the sovereignty of nations and seems to destroy religions, has adopted its own pagan Gnosticism with a Sufi flavor. The meditation room at the UN has a large black magnetic lodestone symbolizing the Black Rock of Mecca. Former UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld was considered to be a Sufi. The black arts were derived from the interplay of evil and black in Arabic, such as the play on two Arabic roots, fecum and fakam, meaning black and wise. The wise wisdom gnosis syndrome is pursued by adepts called arifs, who are trained by Sufi masters and, having attained a certain wisdom of the gnosis, called irfan, which views all existing religions as more or less faint utterances of that great underlying truth. While the Illuminati have attempted, as we have pointed out, to subvert Freemasonry, It should be noted that Freemasonry, per se, is suspect, despite the fine people who join its ranks. Lower-degree Masons have been duped into thinking that the Masonry building symbols were connected with Solomon's temple. Many Jewish Freemasons erroneously think that there is some sort of Jewish element or tradition in Freemasonry because of this. If they knew the truth, their hair would stand on end. The truth is, as Robert Graves, in his introduction to Indri Shah's book, The Sufis, has pointed out, that the builders of Freemasonry were not Solomon's Israelite subjects or Phoenician allies, as is supposed, but Abd al-Malik's Sufi architects who built the Dome of the Rock on the ruins of Solomon's temple and their successors. Their names included Thuban Abdul Fals, or Is, and his great-grandson, Maruf, the son or disciple of David of Tay, whose Sufic codename was Solomon, because he was the, quote, son of David. The architectural measurements chosen for this temple, as for the Kaaba building at Mecca, were numerical equivalents of certain Arabic roots conveying holy messages, every part of the building being related to every other in definite proportion. In effect, Freemasonry supports the Islamic concepts of conquest of Judaism and its destruction as taught in the Quran, and today the Dome of the Rock is a perpetual symbol of the destruction of the temple. Any Mason, irrespective of his personal beliefs, at least is a de facto supporter of these concepts. However, according to the late Chief Rabbi Shlomo Goran's book, Har Habayit, Omar, the caliph who built the dome, actually built it as a synagogue for the Jews. It was after his death that it was changed to a mosque. If Solomon is then not King Solomon in Freemasonry, does the letter G really stand for God? Is it rather something else? Perhaps the G of Gnosticism? It is also interesting to note that the crown and cross symbol used to represent the York Rite in Freemasonry originated with the Knights Templar, who were persecuted as heretics. It is possible that this cross is symbolic of the Rosicrucian or Rose Cross Sufi Illuminist theosophy. Furthermore, a well-known Celtic cross of the 9th century bears an Arab Sufi legend referring to Allah. Graves maintains that Freemasonry began as a Sufi society, reaching England in the 10th century, and that the Knights Templar introduced it into Scotland in the 14th century under the guise of a craft guild. A gentleman named Russ Pine of Los Angeles has been in touch with me for several years, supplying me with intensive documentation on Illuministic subjects. He has done an extensive study on the history of the Crowned Cross. He sent me early Jehovah Witness literature, which bears the symbol as well as the eye pyramid of the Illuminati. He also supplied me with photographs of the grave marker of Pastor Charles Taze Russell's grave in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, which is a pyramid and eye. Russell, 1852 to 1916, founded Jehovah's Witnesses. The witness publication Watchtower could very well be a takeoff of the eye pyramid, where watch replaces the eye and tower the pyramid. Mary Baker Eddy, founder of the Christian Science Church, employed the crown cross symbol. Mary Baker Eddy was close with Theosophical Society Satanist Madame Blavatsky. A complete expose of Eddy's activities, which would indicate that the entire Christian Science movement was part of the Illuminati conspiracy against religions, is to be found in Mrs. Eddy by Edwin F. Dakin. James Webb, in The Occult Underground, pinpoints Gnostic concepts as affecting Eddy. Blavatsky and her society, according to Webb on page 82, sponsored the first cremation in America. All members of the Rockefeller family are cremated upon their death. Illuminist Erwin Canham, CFR and WPF leader, as we have mentioned, is an anti-Semite. The Christian Science Monitor's editor has policies which are anti-Semitic and are disguised with the thin veil of being only anti-Zionist, when it is well known to anyone who has even a cursory acquaintance with the Bible that Zionism is a basic tenet of Judaism. The Jehovah's Witnesses have been known for years to aim their missionary efforts exclusively at Jews, many times using underhanded methods. In the 1950s, the witnesses would rent out halls and advertise high holy day services in densely populated sections of New York City, where crowded synagogue conditions usually resulted in Jewish organizations hiring halls for this purpose. At a certain point in the service, a witness missionary would get up and attempt to convert Jews, supposedly to Christianity, but actually to their cult, which had nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. On one such occasion in the Bronx, one of their missionaries was nearly killed, and the witnesses were sued for fraud. While we have noted the Gnostic satanic aspect of communism, Karl Marx himself appeared to have encouraged black intermarriages. His son-in-law, Lafargue, was black. Nevertheless, Marx is also on record for racial slurs, including the N-word, which, as we pointed out, he also applied to Jews. It was Lafargue's mission to direct activities aimed at attracting non-white races to communism. He also became a spokesman for non-productive lazy segments, which has resulted in communist pressures in our society to foist advancement in the workplace based on ethnicism as opposed to merit, so-called affirmative action. One of his famous essays was entitled The Right to be Lazy and appears in Irving Howe's Essential Works of Socialism. The late professor of Jewish history, Hyman B. Grinston, presented information in his American Jewish History course concerning an entire apartment house cooperative in the Bronx that was owned by an apostate Jewish communist commune, all of whom were males married to black women. The publication in 1981 of Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Bagent, Lincoln, and Lee stirred up much controversy among scholars of the occult and Gnosticism. One aspect concerning the book's main secret society involves the cult of the Black Virgin, title of the book by Ian Begg. There happen to be well over 400 statues of the Virgin Mary in European churches in which the Virgin Mary is depicted as black. There is the hypothesis that these statues owe their origin to Gnostic Sufi Christians who secretly worship the black Egyptian goddess Isis, that was transmitted into other pagan societies such as Rome as the worship of the Earth Mother. Gershom Scholem has traced the incestuous practices of the Sabbatians to that of the Earth Mother worship, which was preserved by an Islamic sect. Earth Mother is also known as Magna Mater, which is treated comprehensively by history of theology professor S. Angus in his classic, The Mystery Religions. Now, the Sufis have also practiced incest over the ages, and their practices have been well documented, at least in one Sufi dervish order, despite their attempts at concealment. In his The Dervishes, the distinguished Orientalist John P. Brown cites other scholars who researched what is popularly known as the Bektashi dervishes. They are one of 70 orders of the Sufi and are part of a list of 18 orders cited in the Encyclopedia Britannica as the most important. Brown maintains that some people called the Bektashi Sarafi, from the Hebrew Semitic Zira, meaning semen, in other words, those who have copulation with their own kindred. They defended the perversion by stating that he who has planted the vine was entitled to taste of the fruit. Orientalist Michael Winter states that this order had synthesized elements of Sunni Shiite Islamic beliefs and Christian elements, the latter making it a popular secret society among Balkan Christians. Winter's observations may account for the spread of Gnostic concepts into Christianity. The Britannica also states that the nefarious Knights Templar had intellectual contacts with them. The mysterious inscription found in Templar excavations, Baphomet, which has mystified scholars, in my opinion, is an acronym for Baal Peor, Horus, and Metatron. The pretentious claim by the Sufi that they are responsible for the authorship of the Zohar is ridiculous and can easily be refuted by hundreds of citations in the Zohar, which imbues a sacred attitude toward sexual practices and is stricter in its sexual guidelines than Jewish law allows. Throughout the ages, the Sufi have set up subgroups and special orders to promote their Gnostic concepts and one world, one religion views. They thus have interfaced with the Illuminati and the All-Seeing Eye cult, as attested to in the list at the end of the book The Cult of the All-Seeing Eye, discussed in Volume 1, which lists prominent Sufi personalities. O. M. Burke's book, Among the Dervishes, is particularly revealing. He proves that the personality of St. Nicholas, alias Santa Claus, is of Sufi origin and personifies Sufi concepts of charity. He also maintains in Chapter 12, The Richest Man Alive, that the Emir of Kuwait is a Sufi. He describes secret meeting places and special mansions and palaces throughout the Arab world devoted to Sufism, as well as a caravan town in the Himalayas. He illustrates a Sufi network growing into India, Afghanistan, and permeating Central Asia. Incidentally, the selection of the name Nicholas for Santa is based on the Hebrew root Mikhail, Numbers 25:18, which means conspiracy. So we have Saint Conspiracy. Perhaps the most influential branch of the Sufi in the Western world masquerades under the veneer of the Baha'i faith. It was popular with certain segments of British aristocracy. Many scholars are convinced that Baha'i derives from Babism, a sectarian heresy of Shiite Islam. However, upon closer inspection of Babism, Bab means gate, and the concepts of gates is of Sufi origin, suggesting that they initiated the heresy among the Shiites through a disinformational doctrine practiced by them and heretical groups in Islamic countries such as the Druzi. To see how the Baha'i faith has affected world events beyond its numbers, consider when General Allenby liberated Haifa, Israel in 1918 during his campaign, he sent the following cable to London concerning the head of the Baha'i faith. Have today taken Palestine. Notify the world that Abdul Baal is safe. The following is documented in J.R. Gaver's book, Baha'i Faith. Lord Allenby was asked by the King of England to inquire about the Bab's health, page 102. The Baha'i work with the UN in many ways, page 32. Phoebe Hearst of the Hearst newspaper clan propagated Baha'i teaching in the U.S., page 88. The Bab was knighted in 1920. Baha'i writings maintain that North America is to be a cradle of the New World Order, page 194. New York City is the city of the covenant, page 98. The main speaker at a Baha'i event in Pennsylvania in 1965 was the editor of the Black American Ebony magazine. The Black is Beautiful connection comes full circle. About 700 years prior to the Reform movement's emergence, the Sufi had already succeeded in having Jews meditate over a Sufi saint during the cantorial repetition of the Masaf Amida prayer on both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The saint, Halaj, born 857, a violent anti-Semite who preached our extermination, was arrested and sentenced to death by torture as a heretic of Islam. His execution consisted of having his hands and feet cut off, his tongue cut out, and his eyes torn from his head on March 6, 922. He is remembered in the persona of a fictitious Rabbi Amnon who never really existed except in the Sufi imagination. The Birnbaum liturgical Mazor states, Rabbi Amnon, a wealthy scholar of noble descent, was pressed by the rulers of Mayans to change his religion. On one occasion, he evasively asked to be given 3 days in which to consider the matter. When at the end of the 3 days he failed to appear, he was arrested. As a punishment, his hands and feet were cut off. The story goes on to relate that they brought the dying rabbi to the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, where he recited the Tema Tekov during Matzah and immediately died. 3 days later, he appeared to Rabbi Kalonimus ben Meshulam and taught him the prayer. Knowing the Sufi, it seems that they called him Rabbi Amnon to suggest Amnon and Tamar, i.e., to subtly allude in meditation to the incestuous relations of these children of King David, to desecrate Judaism in its holiest hours by contemplating the story. The quintessence of Sufism is described by Reynold A. Nicholson in Hastings's Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics as the theory that all existence, thought, and action are really divine leads to consequences from which the Sufis do not shrink. In the first place, the universe must be essentially good. Even infidelity and sin are effects of the divine activity and belong to the divine perfection. Satan himself glorifies God inasmuch as his disobedience is subordinate to the eternal will. All religious beliefs must be essentially true. God, as Ibn el-Arabi says, is not limited by any one creed. Accordingly, one can see the pernicious acceptance of Satanism, paganism, moral relativism, and illicit sexual intercourse. The Noahide and Mosaic laws are dispensed with by Ibn el-Arabi's last remarks. One-world Illuminati concepts and Frankist Sabbationism meld very well with these ideas, as does the theology of communism that should be ipso facto accepted by it. Nicholson was no slouch. He was a lecturer at Cambridge and author of 3 famous books on Islam, including A Literary History of the Arabs, 1907, and The Mystics of Islam, 1914. As we take leave of the Sufi, we should not forget that the Encyclopedia of the Occult holds the Sufi synonymous with the assassins whose name is derived from hashihin, those who imbibe hashish, the opiate. Religion is the opiate of the people, but the Sufi opiate is the real thing. This was the original name of the Ismaili branch of the Shiites, founded by Hassan ibn Sabah at the end of the 11th century, a most ruthless murderer. So the other face of Sufism is synonymous with terrorism, and remember that the first UN chairman, as we pointed out, was a Sufi, and so is the UN meditation room. Finally, we should not forget that the notorious Jacob Frank, who brought Sabbationism to Europe, may have been largely funded by the Sufi. Hillel Levine, who discovered Frank's diary, the Chronica, published by the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities 1984, and translated and edited by Levine, relates that Frank went to Bucharest for 5 days in November of 1757 and met with the Aga and other masters, identified as Bektashi dervishes. Thereafter, finances seem to have improved. The Bektashi had advanced knowledge of Frankist mass conversion to Christianity.